All right. Hey, good afternoon, folks. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics. Today is Sunday, August 11th, 2024. This is your morning update on the tropics with now Invest 98L as our center stage player. We had a few day break after Tropical Storm Debbie, Hurricane Debbie, rather, made landfall along the coast of Florida, taking many days to crawl across the southeast U.S. and now is eventually lifted up and lifted out of the U.S., heavy flooding in its wake. But thankfully, that weather system has left and is no longer a threat. Looking at the rest of the basin, though, today we do have Invest 98L, broad tropical wave moving through the central Atlantic basin. This is going to move more northeastward or northwestward, rather, in the coming days and does threaten some of the northern Antilles, Puerto Rico, and Hispaniola coming up, and then is looking like some sort of recurve towards the Bahamas and then maybe an out to sea towards Bermuda, or maybe a closer call for the eastern U.S. And that's what we're going to talk about mostly today. The rest of the basin is somewhat quiet. There's a little bit of activity down in the southern Gulf of Mexico, but nothing tagged by the National Hurricane Center, and this looks like it's going to drift westward into Mexico. And then our next wave leaving Africa is something to watch, but we still have many days. So we are still expecting quite an active August, and we're not even to the halfway point, and we're looking at possibly our second storm in as many weeks of the month. So National Hurricane Center's morning update from 7:21 this morning. Up to 90% chance of development on this system, AL98 or Invest 98L as it's tagged, 70% in the next 48 hours. And what's very likely to happen is later this afternoon, either at 5 p.m. or 11 p.m., given the fast forward speed of this system, they're going to have to likely issue some sort of tropical storm watches for parts of the U.S. and British Virgin Islands and some of the other northern Antilles. And they will likely designate this as a potential tropical cyclone if it's not already a tropical depression by then. Look at satellite presentation this morning on 98L, and we see that it's kind of got an elongated broad wave axis. It was looking a little healthier yesterday. We had some pretty decent sustained thunderstorm activity and some banding features, but it looks like easterly wind shear is still taking a toll on the system. You can see these upper clouds in this region right here moving quickly to the east and or to the west, rather. Winds are out of the east, and the overall background shear and forward speed looks like it's kept this storm in check. And there's also, it looks like a little bit of dry air still kind of in and out of the system. So your wave axis coming up and rotating around, but it's still kind of an elongated wave axis right now. There's a bit of a misalignment of a little bit of a mid-level circulation, low-level circulation. It is there and it's broad, but we're not seeing pretty sufficient winds on that backside yet. Again, due to that strong easterly shear. So 98L is organizing, but it's kind of taking its time as we maybe expected it would. And it's getting closer to that tropical depression tag, but it is not there yet. So again, this might still need some kind of designation for watches and warnings. And if it does, it'll probably be potential tropical cyclone 5. But not quite there just yet. But if we look at the future of 98L as we zoom back out here, again, expected to lift off more to the northwest in the coming days. Bermuda Azores high is starting to post back up more towards the eastern side of the basin, and this is going to kind of leave an opening here across the western Atlantic, along with a pretty strong cold front for this time of year and a pretty strong trough over the Great Lakes. We've seen some pretty record cold temperatures over the eastern U.S. over the last couple of days and a rare strong August cold front. Now, the southeast U.S. still has the influence of a strong ridge of high pressure over Texas, so it's been very hot for the deep south, but a lot of folks like in the Midwest and some of the plains saw some really nice weather the last couple of days. So we have this really strong trough shown here on our upper level charts, 0Z analysis charts. Again, upper level low over the Great Lakes. And all this is moving off to the east and should be moving around offshore of the U.S. going into this week. So the thought process right now is that you have Invest 98L somewhere down here on this map. This is valid today on Sunday. This is the upper level map showing our jet stream pattern and what's going to move this in the long term. We have this system moving generally off to the northwest, and we have the Bermuda Azores high, again, moving a little bit over to the east. This high will shift back and forth this time of year depending on the long wave pattern. And if you've got a big trough over the eastern U.S., the high is going to build up more to the west. So what happens is there's kind of a weakness forms in this area. So you kind of have this little weak area where the system, which isn't really shown on this map yet because it's very weak, would want to track towards. So We have this trough hanging around going into early next week, and this is by Tuesday morning. Our system is somewhere in the vicinity of the northern Antilles, U.S. British Virgin Islands. And again, you still have this trough hanging out. Now, you have this interesting setup where you have a high trying to build to the north over this. The westerlies this time of year are not that strong, so these troughs are not like these big fall and winter troughs where they just pick anything up and just rip it out to sea, absolutely no problem. But this is an anomalously strong trough, so we're thinking this is going to have enough juice to begin to capture our system. So if we roll this into Thursday, we see our system on the GFS highlighted just north of Hispaniola and due north of Puerto Rico. And what you have here is you still have this trough hanging out over the eastern U.S., but what's happened is it's mostly been cut off. You see the jet stream pattern right here showing kind of a split flow where a lot of the jet stream energy is going north of the trough, and you have almost like a Rex block. You're going to have a cutoff low sitting here. You have it flanked by highs to the east and to the north, and this isn't going to move very fast, although this is a lure to pull our system northward. And the question going into next week is essentially, does this trough hang out far enough offshore to deflect this storm away from the U.S. East Coast, or does this potentially draw the storm towards the East Coast? If this is, say, set up more over, New England, this is not going to just rip this back out to sea, but it could actually wind up coaxing it back towards. I think, given the model trends today, that this the scenario coming towards the U.S. is maybe less likely, because we look at all of our ensemble members. There is a high confidence of a turn around or north of Puerto Rico. Most of the GFS members and virtually all of the European members are turning this very close to Puerto Rico right there, up under there, and then Hispaniola, Dominican Republic, Haiti right there. So we can see on these maps that a lot of the models are pulling this northward. The GFS is a little bit further west than the Euro is, but both models have a fairly high confidence in clustering of a turn somewhere to the east of the Bahamas. And I think that the first checkpoint is going to be, how fast does this exactly form? And do we get this to turn before Puerto Rico? If this moves into Hispaniola and Puerto Rico, then we're going to be on the western edge of guidance and things could change. Now, I point this out to note that both Beryl and Debbie saw significant westward adjustments in the models after what looked like a high confidence forecast. So the models have been trending for several days in this direction, and have been holding this for a while now, this turn around Puerto Rico. So hopefully that's going to stay the case, and if it does, we'll have some impacts across the Virgin Islands, likely mostly rain, some tropical storm conditions possible. Again, they're going to be there in about 2 days, so sometime Tuesday morning, we'll have this storm very near some of the northern Antilles, and then Wednesday, it'll be somewhere near Puerto Rico. Thursday, it'll be starting to make that turn north or near Hispaniola, and to some degree, intensity and track are tied together. If the storm is fairly strong, or at least a healthy tropical storm at this point, it wants to recurve more. If this thing stays weaker or it starts running into these mountainous islands, it could wind up tracking further west also, so I don't want to discount that. But again, most of the ensemble guidance in the longer term, especially the GFS, has almost all of its members out to sea, just one getting close enough for at least some scraping U.S. impacts. But again, not looking tremendously likely. I'm just holding out a bit of reservation just because this pattern is not the cleanest way to get a tropical cyclone to move out to sea without problems. This is something you more commonly see in the end of August into September and October, when your background westerlies are much stronger going into the fall season. As right now, our atmosphere, believe it or not, you live in Florida or the Gulf Coast, you don't believe this, but it is trying to cool off a little bit. And our westerlies are slowly starting to come back into the picture. But early August is still that iffy category for getting these to cleanly move out. So if this was like September 11th, I'd be like, oh yeah, it's gone. It's out of here, no problem. But being August 11th, it's a little bit more tricky to get these to just cleanly move out. But again, betting favorite on the model guidance does say this is going to move out. So bottom line is we're going to keep an eye on this. It's going to need a little bit more time to cook. I think we'll get a potential tropical cyclone either at 5 or 11 p.m. tonight, because I don't think this is going to be a tropical depression by that point. It might need until tomorrow. But you'll see some tropical storm watches for the northern islands. We're going to watch carefully where exactly the center forms. If it winds up becoming more southern dominant and forms up to the south, that could also make westward adjustments. But assuming this generally stays on track and turns north of Puerto Rico and Hispaniola, I think odds are pretty good it's going to continue in some form. Definitely be watching it in Bermuda, and especially if you're in the coastal region of the U.S. I think Florida's pretty good to go on this one. I'd be really surprised if this got close enough to Florida for direct impacts, but in the Carolinas, especially North Carolina and then the mid-Atlantic states, there's some potential that this recurves north and that trough kind of changes trajectory, and this could move back towards the coast. We've seen them sometimes come up and then the next trough ejects them, so still some play there. I wouldn't be absolutely sold this is just going to rip out to sea and not be a problem, but again, U.S. impacts seem like, the lesser of the two favorites right now. So that's what I got for you guys today on your morning update. We'll be following 98L and anything else that comes on the tropics, and we'll have all the updates in between then and now on the page. So as always, guys, thanks for watching and have a good one.